What if the smallest act of kindness you show to someone could come back to you in a way you never imagined? What if, years down the line, that one decision changed everything? In a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, a retired soldier was living on a modest pension, just trying to make ends meet. He never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a man with a simple life, doing what he could. But little did he know, his decision to help a homeless teen would set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. It started with a cold winter evening, the kind of night where the chill bites through even the thickest coats, and the wind howls like it's on a mission to freeze everything in its path. On nights like these, the streets of the small town were mostly empty. Most people stayed inside, tucked warm in their homes, avoiding the cold. But there was one person still out there, sitting on a bench, shivering against the wind. The person wasn't old. They were young, just a teenager. But their clothes were worn, their shoes barely holding together, and their face was hidden in their hands. It was clear that this person didn't have much left. At first, no one paid attention. It was just another face on the street. But then, a retired soldier walked by, on his way home after a quiet day. His pension barely covered his needs, and his life was simple. But he noticed the teenager. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way the teen sat there, alone, looking defeated. Maybe it was the reminder of the struggles the soldier had faced in his younger years. Without thinking, he stopped. And for a moment, he just stood there, watching. It was one of those moments when you know you should do something, but you're not sure what. Finally, the soldier walked up to the teen, his boots crunching in the snow. "Hey," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You okay?" The teen looked up, their eyes filled with exhaustion and confusion. It was clear they hadn't been expecting anyone to stop. They shook their head, barely speaking. "I'm fine." But it was obvious they weren't fine. Without saying much more, the soldier extended his hand, offering a simple gesture. "Come with me," he said. "I've got some soup at my place. You can warm up." At first, the teen hesitated. They didn't know who this man was or why he was offering help. They were used to being ignored, to being treated like they didn't matter. But hunger and cold were powerful motivators. And so, after a brief moment of hesitation, the teen stood up and followed the soldier. Inside the soldier's home, the warmth from the small heater hit like a wave. The smell of soup filled the air. It wasn't much, just a simple meal. But it was enough to make the teen feel human again. They sat at the table, taking hesitant spoonfuls of the soup. The soldier watched quietly, not pushing for conversation. But it was clear that the teen was grateful. After finishing the meal, the teen finally spoke. "I don't know how to repay you," they said softly, their voice almost breaking. The soldier smiled, a quiet kindness in his eyes. "You don't have to repay me," he said. "Just take care of yourself." For a moment, the room was silent. There was an understanding between the two. A moment where the world outside seemed to disappear. The next morning, the soldier woke up to an empty house. The teen had left while he slept, taking nothing but the warmth of the meal and the kindness with them. He didn't expect anything in return. In fact, he never did. But as time passed, the soldier would think about that night. He never saw the teen again. He never knew what happened to them. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important had happened. Maybe it wasn't about what he had done, but about how a simple act of kindness had connected them in a way that neither of them could understand at the time. Months went by, and the soldier continued his quiet life. His pension still barely covered his needs, and he lived as simply as ever. He kept to himself mostly, focusing on the small things that mattered. He would often go for walks, enjoying the quiet of the town, watching the seasons change. And each time he passed that bench, he couldn't help but wonder if the teen was still out there, struggling in silence. And then, one day, years later, something unexpected happened. Years had passed since the soldier had last seen the teen. The quiet town had moved on, and so had he, but life, it seemed, had a way of bringing people back into each other's paths when they least expected it. It was a crisp fall morning, the kind where the air feels fresh and the leaves crunch underfoot. The soldier was on his usual walk, his hands tucked into the pockets of his old jacket. As he passed the small park near his home, he noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. A familiar face. It was the teen. But this time, the teen wasn't sitting alone on a cold bench. Instead, they stood tall, dressed in a neat uniform, carrying a briefcase. The soldier squinted for a moment, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. It had been years, after all. The person who had once seemed so lost now looked different. They looked like they had found their place in the world. Without thinking, the soldier walked over, his heart racing a little faster than usual. The teen, now a young adult, looked up in surprise when they saw him. Their eyes widened. It was as if a flood of memories came rushing back. "I don't believe it," the young man said, his voice a mixture of shock and gratitude. "You're the one who helped me that night. I never forgot it." The soldier's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. He didn't know what to say. All he had done was offer a warm meal and a roof for a night, but the young man's next words took him completely by surprise. "I've been meaning to thank you for years," he said. I couldn't have made it through without that one night. It changed everything for me. It gave me hope when I had none left." The soldier simply nodded, not knowing what to say. He hadn't done anything extraordinary. But for this young man, it had been everything. "You've probably forgotten about me," the young man continued. "But I haven't forgotten you." The soldier was silent for a moment, his mind racing. I never forgot about you either," he said quietly. There was a long pause, the weight of those words settling between them. The young man then reached into his briefcase and pulled out something that made the soldier's eyes widen in disbelief. It was a business card, a card with the name of a law firm printed on it. "I'm a lawyer now," the young man said, his voice steady, but there was a proud smile on his face. "And I want to help you. I don't know how to thank you for what you did, but I want to do something for you. You changed my life. It's time I change yours." The soldier stood there, stunned, as the young man handed him the card. It felt unreal. The teen, the one who had been lost and hopeless, now standing here offering to help him. The soldier had always thought he was just a small part of this person's story, but it seemed like he had played a much bigger role than he ever could have imagined. "Why me?" the soldier asked, his voice filled with wonder. "I didn't do much. You did everything," the young man said, his voice unwavering. "You gave me hope, and that's something I'll never forget." For a moment, they just stood there looking at each other. And in that moment, the soldier realized something important. Sometimes, kindness is not just about doing the right thing in the moment. Sometimes, it's about making a difference that you may never fully see. It's about planting a seed, not knowing where it will grow or how far it will travel. As the soldier walked home later that day, the business card heavy in his pocket, he couldn't help but think back to that cold winter evening, to the young teen shivering and alone. He hadn't expected anything in return, and yet, here was this young man, offering him a future that seemed too good to be true. Life, it seemed, had a funny way of coming full circle. The soldier's humble act of kindness had not only changed the teen's life, but it had somehow brought him a reward he never saw coming. And the more he thought about it, the more the soldier realized that the real reward was not the offer of help he had received from the young man. It was the knowledge that his one small decision, that night, had made a real difference in someone's life. That was something he would carry with him forever. The next morning, the soldier sat at his kitchen table, looking at the business card in his hand. He smiled quietly to himself. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew that one simple act of kindness had changed everything. He wasn't just a retired soldier anymore. He was someone who had made a lasting impact without even trying. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest reward of all. The soldier kept the business card close, a constant reminder of how one small act could ripple through a person's life. He was still processing the unexpected turn of events. But life had a way of moving forward, no matter how much time one spent reflecting. The soldier had always been the type to move forward with purpose, and now, even more than before, he felt the weight of the difference his life had made on someone else. Days passed, and with each passing one, the soldier found himself thinking more and more about the young man. What had he done to deserve such a transformation? He thought back to his own life, his years of service, the battles he'd fought, and the quiet retirement that followed. His life hadn't been easy, but he had always tried to be kind when he could. Maybe that was all anyone could do, just show kindness, no matter the circumstances. One afternoon, the soldier decided to take a walk through the town. He was older now, and his steps weren't as quick as they once had been, but there was still strength in them. As he strolled, he noticed the changes that had occurred in the town over the years. New businesses opening, buildings being renovated, and life moving forward in ways he never could have imagined when he had first arrived here all those years ago. As he walked, he passed the spot where he had met the young man. The memory came rushing back in full force. The shivering teen, the warmth of the meal, and the conversation that had changed everything. He remembered how he had hoped the teen would find his way, but he never imagined this. Never imagined that one day that same young man would come back and offer him something so unexpected. His thoughts were interrupted when he noticed something ahead of him, a familiar face. It was the young man again, standing in front of a new building, his briefcase in hand. This time, however, the soldier saw something even more remarkable. The young man wasn't alone. A group of people were with him, talking and laughing. They seemed to be working on something, and as the soldier drew closer, he could hear snippets of conversation. "I think we're ready to get this off the ground," one person said. "The new outreach program is going to make a big difference." "I agree," the young man replied. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but it's going to change lives, just like it did for me." The soldier's heart swelled as he watched from a distance. The young man had done more than just find his footing. He had gone on to create something bigger, something that would help others who were once in the same position he had been. This wasn't just about one person's success, it was about a whole new chapter for many people. The soldier's curiosity got the better of him, and he approached the group, his footsteps steady but careful. When the young man saw him, he broke into a smile and waved him over. "Hey!" the young man called out. "I'm glad you stopped by. There's someone I want you to meet." The soldier walked over, unsure of what to expect. The young man introduced him to a group of individuals who had clearly been impacted by the outreach program. The soldier's heart was filled with warmth as he listened to their stories. People who had been given a second chance, people who had found hope through the very program the young man had helped establish. "This is the guy who saved my life," the young man said to one of the program members, who looked at the soldier in awe. The soldier didn't know what to say. He had never seen himself as a savior, just a man who had offered a little help when it was needed. But as the stories kept coming, he realized that maybe he had been a part of something much larger than he could have imagined. "You know," the young man said, turning back to the soldier, "I never would have been able to help these people if it wasn't for what you did for me all those years ago. You showed me that there was still kindness in the world. I want to make sure that kindness keeps going. I want to help others the way you helped me." The soldier could hardly believe what he was hearing. Here was a young man who had turned his life around, who had taken what little help he had received and used it to change the lives of so many others. The soldier had given him a chance, a small act of kindness, and now it had created a ripple effect, spreading far beyond what either of them could have ever imagined. The young man shook the soldier's hand, and in that simple gesture, the soldier felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time in a long while, he understood the true meaning of his own life. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about making a difference, no matter how small. And as he walked away from that meeting, his heart a little lighter than it had been in years, the soldier couldn't help but smile. He had given a little kindness to one person, and that one act had changed more lives than he would ever know. Sometimes the smallest actions can create the biggest impacts. Sometimes the smallest actions can create the biggest impacts. One simple act of kindness can ripple out, touching lives in ways you could never expect. Think about it. What small act of kindness can you do today to make someone's life better? If you were inspired by this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Mystic Tales for more heartwarming and motivational stories like this one. Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Has a small act of kindness ever made a big impact in your life? We'd love to hear your stories.